to ensure the security and continuing stability, the Republic will be reorganized into the first galactic empire!
It's dropping lower!
As children, we believe justice comes automatically, that good triumphs over evil. But as adults, we realize justice does not come automatically, and for justice to prevail, good people must rise and stand against injustice, often at a great expense to themselves.
Let your death be the final word in the story of rebellion. My faithful, nothing will stop the return of the Sith!
You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. The Hero Within, Elaine Miller, Plain Sense 4, Long Island. If you have the courage and you have the heart, that hero just might be you.
Heroes have always been a part of our lives. Our storybooks, comics, TV shows, literature, and movies highlighted the adventures of characters whose sole desire is to fight for justice against dark characters or evil empires. The storyline follows one concept: good always triumphs over evil. We have our favorite fictional characters who exemplify courage, strength, and a high moral code of ethics. We strive to illuminate the intrinsic qualities within ourselves that are portrayed by our favorite characters who are larger-than-life personalities. They are the heroes we want to become. When the gigantic airline industry, coupled with air management systems, designed newly constricted flight paths, they created a highway in the sky which was solely developed to benefit their profit margins. Ultimately, this left our communities struggling to cope with the reality that we are, in fact, living under the highway to hell. For those of us who are subjected to the torment of endless flights over our homes, it soon became apparent that we were embroiled in a conflict of good versus evil. When an enterprise and an agency knowingly exposes millions of people to unhealthy levels of noise and emissions and denies its existence, it becomes blatantly obvious we are dealing with nefarious characters. People rose up to fight the inequities, and a movement evolved. From local neighborhoods to communities across our country to people located on 4 continents, heroes began to emerge. Your voice, letters, emails, phone calls, organizations, research, conferences, meetings are the result of heroic efforts on the part of each and every one of you who have not faltered in your pursuit of justice. Face to face with a Leviathan industry and agency, you have shown your courage, strength, commitment, and perseverance. I tip my hat to all of the heroes.
Every 2 minutes or less, and it makes a lot of noise that the whole house shakes sometimes.
It's really a torturous way to live, to be quite honest with you.
Elaine Miller is the co-founder of Plain Sense 4 Long Island, which represents the heavily impacted communities from JFK and LaGuardia airports. Working with federal, state, and local officials, the organization works to reduce the severe impact of noise and air pollution from aviation, which people are subjected to daily.
A massive hats off to citizen advocates who successfully secured the Quiet Skies Caucus joint letter to FAA's Brian Bedford and US DOT Secretary Sean Duffy, and representatives who signed the letter demanding accountability from the FAA and local airport operators. While 32 members of Congress responded to their community's outrage, Representative Susie Lee refused to offer even cheap lip service, completely betraying Nevada's 3rd District by refusing to sign the bipartisan Quiet Skies Caucus letter, while callously leaving Southern Nevada families to choke on toxic air pollution and the deafening assault of the FAA's low-flying aircraft. These dedicated neighbors stood strong on the front lines, battling deception and egregious lies to defend your fundamental right to safe, quiet, and healthy skies. This is a proof that grassroots unity forces federal action. Now back them up to end the sleepless nights and constant aerial siege on our homes. The reality on the ground is severe. Our residential communities have been transformed into a toxic aviation hellhole of continuous unbearable noise and air pollution. By routinely exceeding the FAA's maximum residential threshold of 65 dB DNL, rogue flight operations have subjected our communities to illegal levels of acoustic bombardment. This environmental degradation has left entire neighborhoods trapped in a crisis of chronic sleep deprivation and long-term health risks like asthma, cancer, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, and dementia. For 25 years, the FAA and the airline industry have been quietly shifting air traffic control to satellite navigation. In 2006, they rebranded this massive shift with a slick corporate name, NextGen. Ever since, the FAA and aviation lobbyists have used NextGen as a deliberate disinformation and propaganda campaign. They oversell the benefits to secure more taxpayer funding and bypass environmental restrictions. Meanwhile, they carefully hide the true cost: a relentless highway in the sky that leaves communities below sick, confused, frustrated, and sleep-deprived. This shouldn't happen in a nation that values local control and quality of life. The FAA has become a captured regulator, abusing its federal authority to maximize airline and aviation industry's profits at the expense of regular citizens. Ever since, the FAA and the aviation industry, including airlines, general aviation, airport authorities, manufacturers, lobbyists, and local and federal government, have collaborated to spin their NextGen efforts. This coordinated messaging maximizes benefits for both sides. It secures more funding for ever-expanding FAA powers, while granting the industry no environmental or noise restrictions and higher subsidies to facilitate greater airline profits. The FAA's wasteful $45 billion NextGen program has been exposed as a deeply mismanaged and an epic failure, with the Department of Transportation Inspector General audit confirming that after 2 decades of spending, only 16% of the promised benefits have actually materialized. To hide these massive cost overruns and delays, the FAA aggressively scaled back its performance goals by 45%, shielded accountability by removing NextGen tracking metrics from its official reports, and oversold the system's efficiency. In reality, the program's primary operational change, funneling airplanes into narrow, hyper-precise satellite flight paths, merely shifted the environmental burden, turning unsuspecting neighborhoods into noise-polluted highways in the sky, while providing billions in taxpayer subsidies to big airlines and general aviation. The exposure of NextGen and narrow noise corridors all across the country has forcefully shifted the conversation from an annoyance into a catastrophic economic and environmental crisis that our leaders can no longer ignore. Real estate and economic studies definitively highlight that the FAA's NextGen concentrated flight paths have slashed property values by up to $1.8 billion in heavily impacted communities, actively eroding the local tax base and devaluing residents' primary assets. Simultaneously, the unrelenting dumping of ultrafine particles and toxic pollutants from FAA's low-flying planes is severely damaging public health. Despite this compounding financial, biological, and ecological devastation, U.S. Congress, port authorities, city councils, and local commissioners have aggressively suppressed this public health and quality of life emergency, leaving themselves complicit in the destruction of neighborhood equity and constituent well-being. The truth is finally out, and it is terrifying. The government's own scientific researchers have exposed the lethal reality that low-altitude, concentrated flights and relentless hours of aerial assault cost lives, with women facing the highest risk of mortality. Despite desperate attempts by the FAA, abusive port authorities, and Congress to suppress this data under the fraudulent label of no significant impact, they can no longer hide the fact that nighttime noise and prolonged toxic pollution is linked to premature death. Local officials can no longer hide behind federal bureaucracy. Ignoring this deadly, weaponized airspace makes you directly complicit in the mounting death toll of your own constituents. Right here at home, our Las Vegas city officials, Clark County commissioners, and federal representatives Susie Lee and Stephen Horsford are lagging miserably behind other communities. While some municipalities are stepping up to crush toxic aviation noise and toxic air pollution, Las Vegas is being left in the dust and left to rot. Your involvement is critical. Elected officials rarely take action until they face the unified pressure of an organized community. Far from a passive petition list, our movement grows stronger by the day. We are standing shoulder to shoulder with a powerful nationwide coalition to demand immediate accountability from the FAA, politicians, and port authorities who continue to compromise our constitutional right to safe, peaceful skies. Take action today by contacting your city council, Clark County commissioners, and federal representatives. Demand they file a joint class action lawsuit against the FAA and pursue it to the Supreme Court. The FAA routinely ignores community suffering, silences opposition to aviation noise, and dismisses complaints about NextGen flight paths. Furthermore, airport authorities and local politicians, both nationwide and right here in Clark County, are apparently silencing citizen advocates and intimidating whistleblowers. Tell your representatives to stop lagging behind, step up, and drag the FAA to justice now. Vote out politicians that sell out America to foreign interests and defense industry lobbyists. While enriching themselves in Washington through rampant corruption and insider trading, these politicians deliberately gut our healthcare, education, housing, and public safety, intentionally starving American communities to bankroll endless forever wars that line the pockets of lobbyists, foreign interests, and their billionaire donors. Speaker Mike Johnson's viral defense of lawmaker stock portfolios, claiming that a $174,000 base salary and a $70,000 taxpayer-funded expense allowance aren't enough to support a family, is a shameless admission of congressional corruption and an ultimate systemic betrayal. While average Americans struggle to survive on $64,000 a year, unable to afford basic food, rent, or groceries due to stagflation, Speaker Johnson shamelessly claims Congress makes the ultimate sacrifice. This is the legislative body of our country deeply mired in rampant corruption, insider trading, financial Ponzi schemes, and stock market manipulation, while lobbyists write the laws and politicians cash out on a rigged system. Yet, Speaker Johnson defends these conflicts of interest, implying that if we don't allow politicians to exploit the stock market to feed their families, qualified people will no longer find it viable or interesting to run for public office.
Well, look, the salary of Congress has been frozen since 2009. When you adjust for inflation, a member of Congress today is making 31% less than they made in that year. It goes down every year. And over time, if you stay on this trajectory, you're going to have less qualified people who are willing to make the extreme sacrifice to run for Congress. I mean, it's just people just make a reasonable decision as a family on whether or not they can come and move to Washington, have a residence here, residence at home, and do all the things that are required. So the counter argument is, and I have some sympathy, look, at least let them engage in some stock trading so that they can continue to take care of their family.
Call your federal representatives today. Demand they pass these critical legislative directives to strip the FAA of its unchecked monopoly, stop the agency from abusing its sovereign authority, and protect the American public from airspace mismanagement. Pass the American Transit Modernization and Noise Reduction Act. Purpose: to rebuild America's failing public transit, eliminate wasteful subsidies for elite private aviation, and construct a world-class high-speed maglev rail network to protect public health and outcompete global rivals. Restore local control. Overhaul the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990 and the 2012 FAA Reauthorization Act to strip the FAA of its absolute power and return airspace, zoning, and flight path authority to local governments to permanently keep traffic away from dense populations. Fund local enforcement, authorize municipal governments within 5 miles of any runway to impose hefty fees for harmful aviation activities, and to fully fund independent noise monitoring, mandatory airport curfews, and other aggressive local mitigation actions to preserve community health. Slash legal noise limits. Force the FAA to lower the maximum legal residential noise threshold from the outdated, deafening 65 dB DNL down to a safe, humane 55 dB DNL. Raise mandatory altitudes and ban recreational stunts and practicing pilots above congested areas. Mandate a strict minimum altitude of 10,000 feet for all commercial and general aviation aircraft within 5 miles of an airport, while legally banishing recreational and flight school training pilots to remote, unpopulated areas. Enforce independent oversight. Bypass the FAA's corrupted internal metrics by requiring immediate, mandatory, and entirely independent third-party health and noise impact studies conducted by EPA or NTSB. For too long, the FAA has allowed the American public to be exposed to ear-damaging and dangerously loud aircraft noise, as well as toxic air emissions. If the FAA and Congress were truly committed to serving the public, not just the interests and bottom line of airlines and the aviation industry, they would ensure that communities have full access to the information, resources, and tools needed for meaningful and effective participation in decisions that affect their health, quality of life, and environment. The FAA and the U.S. Congress must restore meaningful local control by reforming the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990 and the FAA Modernization and Reform Act of 2012. Airports exist to serve, not exploit, their surrounding municipalities, and local communities should have the legal right to impose fees, reject impactful aviation activities, limit operational intensities, and apply curfew hours and other meaningful management and mitigation actions, all to preserve the quality of our communities. Protect your environment, protect your children, protect your home, and protect your community. Be the activist who pushes back when FAA and aviation industry cross the line. Thank you for your support.